proud of you.
Jason.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the October 22nd, 2024 regular Board of Education meeting. We call the meeting to order at 7 o'clock. With us this evening is Mrs. Slim, Mrs. Guernsey, myself, Jacobson, Mr. Asa, Mrs. Maxicanelli, Mr. Peterson, Mrs. Rinaldi, as well as our representatives, our superintendent, Mr. Testani. If everyone could please rise. Mrs. Guernsey.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, student reports. Who's going to go first today?
Yeah.
If you just want to make sure we speak up, just because for the microphones. Thanks so much.
Good evening, everyone. To start off, during homeroom, the seniors had our first ever drone picture taken of us by Mr. Johnson from the Library Media Center. During homeroom, we all gathered outside on the football field around the Mustang. It was great weather, and I think it was a great outcome.
On Friday, we had our fall pep rally where we celebrated our fall student athletes. And we had events that featured mini golf, music chairs, and performances by the ward dance team, cheerleading team, and band. Special thanks to Mr. Sada and Mr. Narwhals for organizing the fall pep rally.
Speaking of the pep rally, followed by the pep rally, on Saturday, we had homecoming. The juniors and seniors all came out. It's our annual fall dance. Special thanks to the class advisors, Ms. Del Sol and Mr. Saad, our class clubs, our class officers, and our amazing designer, Kyla Lamb. I just want to give her recognition for a second. Kyla has made every single poster that we've ever had since, I believe, freshman year. So she's probably made tens of posters and flyers. and we wouldn't be anywhere without her.
This week, we're excited to announce that the Fairfield Ward High School Choir will be performing with the eighth grade choirs from Thomason Middle School and Fairfield Woodland School. I will be performing also with them, so I'm really excited for that event.
Right. And then as usual, this Friday, we have Spirit Month is continuing with our, I believe, third week, and we have Career Day. Also, speaking of tonight, we have the Chick-fil-A fundraiser. I actually just came from there. Did not get to eat yet because I had to be here, of course. But we have the fundraiser going on from 5 to 8 at the Pope Road Chick-fil-A in Fairfield. A portion of the proceeds are going to the class of 2025. As I said, Kyla, our designer, she also designed the flyer for that as well. So just excited for it.
Go back for a sandwich.
I am. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Represent. Don't like Chick-fil-A.
This week we have our fall play, which is coming up. Our play is Pride and Prejudice, and it is showing on the 25th at 7 p.m. and the 26th of October at 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. in the Fairfield Ludlow Auditorium. Tickets are available online at the FLHS Drama website, or you can buy them at the door. And we will have an ASL interpreter on the 26th at the 2 p.m. showing. AP exam registration also opened on the 18th of October. Students who want to take the AP exam in May are welcome to sign up and register. And they can find the link to register on their class of Google Classroom. They have to register by November 7th to avoid any late fees. We will also be having senior costume events. On October 31st, we'll have our senior Halloween costume contest and college applications. Some students had their first deadline of October 15th. And we also have the deadline of November 1st. November 1st is also free application day for the Connecticut schools. We have our ALS, we had the ALS walk this Saturday. It was very successful. I and Louis walked for Mr. Dan Graziotti, whose son is a senior at FLHS. And we raised over the team raised over $30,000 for ALS research and had over 70 walkers present. Okay. And then we also have, in our cafeteria, we're selling Nest t-shirts, our Falcon Nest, to support breast cancer awareness at any Pink Out games. These can be worn any game, but mostly for the football game against Darien on Saturday.
As you all know, a couple weeks ago, we lost a student. His name was Juliet, and she loved to read. So the school set up an event called Juliet's Bookcase, which is a couple tables set up in the library filled with the books that she liked to read. But also during lunch, we had an event where you could write a list of your favorite books and submit them to that bookcase, and they will be displayed in the library on the center table. Also, I saw the TikTok change of the Chick-fil-A fundraiser. Great acting.
Okay, well, thank you, Walter Fitzgerald.
Hello, my name is Alex Borst.
And my name is Cece Bledsoe. Thank you again for having us at your meeting to explain everything that is going on at the Walter Fitzgerald campus. On October 9th, students from WFC returned to Ward and Ludlow to take PSATs. Staff from WFC joined the two high schools to help.
Our students harvested the remaining tomatoes, peppers, parsley, and tomatillos from our garden. We are starting to plan which seeds we will use in 2025.
We have started a morning announcement show called Wake Up Walter Fitz, which will air every day one. Our students will write, record, and create a video to show the students and staff. It will include information for WFC students about Fitz happenings, but also information about happenings at Ward. Sorry.
Many of our students who also attended took part in their homecoming dance on Friday. According to one WFC student, Dean was caught dancing Seems to be a highlight.
On Friday, October 18th, our students attended a field trip to Southport Beach. They explored the intertidal zone, captured pictures and videos, used our new drones, and tested water samples for our Long Island Sound Research Project.
In 12th grade English class, students created videos called Humans of Walter Fitz and interviewed staff. The project is based on humans of.
Our teachers have started an interdisciplinary project on humans' relationship with the natural world. They applied for a 20 grand grant from National Geographic. We will know in January if our school was chosen. The funds cover digital cameras, video editing software, supplies, guest speakers who are experts in photography, and transportation for field trips. For our first lessons, students and staff engaged in a nature walk through Abstract Land Trust, which adjoins WFC. The students took pictures and completed a mindfulness assignment on nature.
Our seniors who play sports at Ward and Ludlow are celebrating senior nights for football, soccer, lacrosse, etc.
Next week begins Spirit Week at WFC, which will culminate with Pajama Day on Friday.
Our students created a video about their I'm so sorry. Our students created a video about their projects and project-based learning at WFC. This past Saturday, a student presented the video at the Connecticut Science Teachers Association Conference.
This week, This week, our students are working with the school staff to apply to colleges and write their essays.
We are excited to share that our school has been granted another $5,000 from the CTC grant and UConn for research on the Fairfield watershed and Long Island Sound.
As requested by Ms. Rose, I want to give our Mandarin teacher at WFC a shout out. Hi, Ms. Rose, if you're watching, you said you were gonna check in, so I hope you really have. And that's all for WFC.
Aw, thank you very much. A lot of fun and purposeful meeting work happening across our schools. Thank you so much for your reports. Any questions for our students? Congratulations on grants and your celebrations and memories that you're sharing with all of us here. So we much appreciate that. So go get your Chick-fil-A if you want to go. Everyone's headed to Chick-fil-A. Word. All right. Thank you so much for being here. See you next time. Thank you, though.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Feel better for you.
Thank you.
Feel better.
Get some glasses on.
All right. Public comment. If anyone has any public comment, they can come forward at this time. Oh, okay. All right. Well, I select. All right. No presentations this evening, everyone. So we'll move on to old business. Approval of policy 6146 graduation requirements. Recommended motion that the Board of Education approve policy 6146 graduation requirements. Can I get a motion, Mrs. Maxim Kennelly, seconded by Mrs. Flynn? No?
Yeah, so I didn't get any questions about this. Again, this is purely an update. So I don't know if there are any questions or anything that occurs to the board that you'd like us to look into going forward, but otherwise, certainly we'd like this updated with the deletion of 2024 and then the important inclusion of the financial literacy. So I don't know if there are any other questions.
What? All right. I'll take it out to the public. There's no one there. So back to the board. All in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, next one, approval of policy 3542.42, food service finance. Recommended motion that the Board of Education approve policy 3542.42, food services, moved by Mrs. Maxinelli, seconded by Mrs. Guernsey.
So again, just a reminder that this language is all in red because it's entirely new and we believe reflective of what we do and most importantly, designated as needed.
Questions, comments? All right, back to the board. All in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Approval of policy 6112, school day. Recommended motion that the Board of Education approve policy 6112, school day. Can I get a motion, please? Mrs. Maxinelli, seconded by Mrs. Flynn.
So again, this one, the significant update here is getting rid of the old language, which involved the world of a lifetime ago where kindergartners would sometimes be in for only half day or what we called extended day, and otherwise nothing too controversial here.
Questions, comments? Public? All right, back to the board. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, moving on, approval of the following policies with proposed changes per the policy audit. Recommended motion. What do you want to waive? Thank you. Mr. Asa moves to waive the reading of the motion. Any objections? None. Motion reading is waived. Mrs. Maxine?
Sure. So the only question I have to ask just to be, oh no, that's the end of the quotation marks. I was about to ask.
Sorry, do we have to put the motion on the table?
Oh, yeah, recommend,
Sorry.
someone to move the motion, please. Mr. Asa, do you want to do that? Mr. Asa, seconded by Mrs. Maxinelli. Sorry.
So again, some of these were very, very minor tweaks. Others of them a little bit more, probably a third of them or a quarter of them involved updating titles so that it was the appropriate person. And other than that, happy to take any questions.
I do just want to say thank you for, this is an enormous job that the policy committee has done a great job with. I did try to go through and find straight commas and such, and it was all very clean, and I really
Not
appreciate
one?
that work.
Not one?
Not one that I was going to bring up.
Oh.
I didn't want to undermine the value of the work. Somebody else can.
Question, anyone else? All right,
I just one comment I want to point out just going forward is that with that policy 0300, that's one a very small change, but one that we're, I think, happy with, which is the idea that if there are legal reference changes going forward, that it will no longer not only not come to the full board, it's not even going to come to the policy committee. For some of you that might not be a big deal. For somebody else, it might feel more seismic, but I just felt that one should be particularly highlighted. None of the others I don't feel as much. If Mr. Krasnoff had been here, I did want to point out that policy did discuss 3516.3 for accidents. He raised some concerns about the broadness of that language, and after some policy committee discussion, we felt comfortable, staff felt comfortable with the language as is, and more to the point, we couldn't come up with a better way to define accidents, and so we felt comfortable leaving that alone. But just to Mr. Krasnoff, if he's listening, that it is something that policy took up. And other than that, again, if there are no questions, happy to move forward.
All right, get back to the public. All in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, new business, first quarter financial report, Mrs. Laborious.
For the opportunity to present the first.
I just wanted, before you guys start, anyone who comes up to the table, we've had some reports that's hard to hear people at the table.
Okay.
So we're gonna need everyone who comes to the table to.
So thank you, Gordon Laborious, Chief Financial Officer of Fairfield Public Schools. And the first quarter report, I'm happy to say we're on target for our spending with a small gap. And that small gap is about 133,732. That is, we wanted to bring to your attention two main items that we're going to monitor and watch. The first was the cost of substitutes. We talked about that in the budget process. It's very early in the year. Some management tools were put into place to maintain a steady level for the subs, but we still think there might be a small gap in that sub cost that we can make up as we monitor it throughout the budget year. There's an additional gap that we had mentioned in the budget process last year as well in the town pension costs. We received the town pension valuation rate. We had already established our budget. Budget was built based on a trend assumption. So I did also attach in the board's packet a memo reminding us March 28th about that, which showed that we just overall the pension costs have dropped by an average of 5.2% because no members are coming on. So as every year, meaning every year, some people retire and we don't add new members because they go into the 401A. And so we assumed a conservative 1.4% reduction, but the actual cost that the board passed on was a 12.2%. I mean, that the town passed on, I apologize, was a 12.2% increase. So that's a net gap of about $238,000. And we've been built. So that is a true gap in that area. Other than that, I'd call your attention to after the memo, that first summary page. So the personnel services that 411 is a direct result of the gap in subs that we are forgetting again early in the year. Overall, our salaries, if you turn to the page just behind that, it looks like it's a negative 585. That's not a negative 585. That's because in the benefit line, there's money that's going to be transferred. Oh, I'm sorry, I'll wait till it's the one I didn't remember this time, but it's the one that's looks like this, and it's headed with summary by major classification balances as of 9/30 year-to-date actual. So if you remember, it includes the budget, the transfers, the revised budget, actuals, which is the expenditures to date, encumbrances, which is what we're obligated to pay against our current staff actually. And then the projected additional obligations, which gets us to the total expense and the projected balance. The reason you see a negative balance in line 1, which is salaries, is just because their transfers haven't happened from the wage and benefit funds. So in other words, for example, contracts that we have settled, you know, you see the expense, but we just need to perform that budget transfer into that line. So that's why we're a negative 109, mainly because of that negative 376 in the subline. So it's looking good on the personnel side. Fixed charges, you'll see that gap in the pension line because of the town pension shortfall in the budget. And pupil personnel expenses, there's a small gap, but it's early in the year. We're showing that small gap because it's a very conservative estimate. You know, right now in the encumbrances and requisitions, projected additional obligations, you see that negative 1.5. That's a strange one. It's because $2.2 million of excess cost doesn't get booked until later in the year. So really, the additional expenditures that will happen in that pupil personnel line is approximately $600K. We meet regularly to look at those purchase orders and, you know, refine and refresh as we know what student services are needed throughout the year. So we feel pretty comfortable at this point in the year that that's going to be okay. School expenses, we're spending the full school expense budget with the exception of copiers. We have some savings there. Mr. Peterson will be happy to hear. Through our print management, and we're looking forward to talking about that in the budget as well as we bring on some potential additional savings for next year. Support expenses, you know, steady state there. We are seeing an uptick in the professional tuition resource line because of our teachers are taking advantage of the contract negotiation, which enables them to get reimbursed for courses that they're taking. And maintenance, operations, and transportation. Right now, you're seeing a plus 179 in that overall bucket. Early in the year, but for buses, there's only a small savings right now because as we go throughout the year, if we're unfortunately not running buses, we'll see credits and savings. Right now, it's an assumption about not fully loaded, but pretty fully loaded. We're showing flush on the utilities because we have that new contract in place. We're hopeful, and Sal and his team, Mr. Morbido and Mr. Papa George, are monitoring that because we believe we'll see additional savings as per the synergistic overall utilities. Capital outlay flush, and so that leaves us with that negative 133. Again, we'll be able to bring that to balance as we go throughout the year, monitoring those subs, the utilities, the buses, and our special education needs. So I'll pause there and see if there are any questions.
Questions? Maxine, no.
Just a few. First is, I know this is a very, very minor number, but I don't recall in the budget cycle talking about that NEASC that somebody is up again. So is this something that we had talked about in January and that we knew was part of this year's budget cycle?
Yes, can you?
Line 26,
Okay, thank you.
the DOE dues I'm used to, I just didn't recall NEASC as being part of.
Is it Ludlow would review one of their cycles?
I just don't remember our talking about it back in January.
I can find out. I don't know. It's the label of that. I thought this is just dues and fees and the ask was a subset of those dues and fees. So I apologize, but I can get back to you on that.
Just kind of follow up.
Sure.
Please do follow up because it may just be as simple as a carryover from the line item from
The naming
previous,
of
the
it.
naming of it.
I do think
So it could, that's how, it might just be in.
Well, because what I would have noticed is there's no way that we wouldn't have questioned Board of Ed dues in the amount of $51,000 because there's nothing we belong to that costs $51,000.
I
So
think it should be Board of Ed dues and fees, dues and fees, yes. So I will clarify that.
again, I know it's not a huge dollar amount, but
Clarify.
I had a couple of other questions. And maybe, I don't know, through the chair to Mr. Tostani, I don't know if this conversation should wait for the next agenda item, but the substitute teachers. Obviously, that's concerning. Obviously, I'm not sure to any degree that we're able to do that. I mean, they're contractually allowed what they are allowed, but I was wondering if you have noticed trends, and if you have noticed trends, if you see that in any way impacting what we should be considering with the calendar.
Yes and no. So we've had extensive conversations at our level. I am regularly communicating with the FEA, Ms. Gary's here, obviously. So we have these conversations a lot, as recently as yesterday, and prior to that last week. So we are monitoring, we are working collaboratively. I know Mick's done a great job on his end, sending out correspondences regarding professional responsibilities. We are looking at some of the trends. To that point, I think there are some tricky nuances to the schedule that we tried to address. I mean, some of it just being common sense this year in the calendar. But I think that's one of the things we have to be very strategic as we start to look at when holidays fall. What the impact is if a holiday, for example, falls on a Thursday.
Right.
Because this year there was a holiday that fell on a Thursday and Friday was a really bad day for us.
Suddenly a lot of sniffles.
Suddenly people were not feeling very well. It could have been the allergies in the air. Also Tuesday, I mean, we have election day coming up. So these are some things I think we need to be cognizant of. Again, though, we can't drive the schedule in adding extra days to the end of the school year, because I think that's really unfair to the vast majority of staff who are very conscientious about coming to work and coming to work on a regular basis. It is some of the outliers, and I think that's in every organization. And we're going to work together on having those tough conversations because, and again, Lisa Dukowski and our human resource department, to her credit, does a great job. We have over an 80% fill rate. So that also attributes, but it also prevents us from having to do some of the creative things that we know isn't ideal when teachers are out. But I think as we see the year get into the ebbs and flows, I think we'll see some improvement in that, hopefully as well.
Okay, thank you. Secondly, you've already referenced the transportation and possibly likely recouping some money there, but at this point, can you tell us how many bus runs aren't happening? Or is it just straight up that they're not happening, or is it a day-to-day thing? And
Yes.
what schools are being most heavily impacted? What's the deal there?
I don't have that for you here. We do look at that. We don't have our first bill. So the assumption in the projection is with fully loaded on the gen ed for buses, I want to say, but a different mix in the tiers, I want to say.
The only issue we're having is some of the after-school activities, getting buses to be able to make those runs. So we're trying to figure out a creative way. Angelus and I talked about that yesterday. He has consulted with our town attorney as well, looking at the current contract. If we have an opportunity to have an on-call service, if they can't fulfill our needs with some of the after-school buses for sports. The one school that's being impacted, I think, the most we're trying to work this through is Mill Hill.
Okay.
In the afternoon runs.
I know a couple of years ago, Tomlinson was triple sitting kids in seats, and that was just,
Yeah, no, we haven't
and
had that.
45-minute minimum rides,
We're
so.
just having a hard time getting the runs done in the first tier in the afternoon and then getting the buses up to Mill Hill.
Okay.
So we're working through that.
Running a lot more full than compared to where we ended last year, so at least in the projection, we'll have the first billing in September, so we can see what we're billing for the runs.
All right, thank you. A couple more questions, and I'm trying to find where it said it in the memo, that one of the reasons for greater costs, and I know we'd had more staff members getting contractual bumps, you know, based on, but there was also a reference to PD costing more. And I was wondering what aspect of that took us by surprise that we didn't budget for it?
We are within the PD budget.
And I'm sorry that I'm not finding that line.
And it would be in support, so let's see, support. There's professional tuition, which is line 25. We are.
No, yeah, so the projection for support includes a projected need for professional development. So what need for professional development is there that we did not already anticipate in the last budget, in the budget approval?
So negotiations that happened for SE trainers and secretaries, and so it's a minor amount.
Okay.
Because we did account for the PD needs for the teachers that had changed, but there was a new language in the now almost signed contract for the paraeducators as well as for the secretaries and the SE trainers. Small amounts, but higher needs than what was budgeted.
We're gonna have to give them the mandated training. For example, we attempted to do something on election day, but we're gonna have to pay them to come in, so. And for the tuition reimbursement, it is stemming from more people going out.
Yeah, no, that one I
classes.
understood. It was the
Because of the
reference to PD I wasn't sure about.
Yeah, so we're gonna have to pay the paras and SE trainers to come in for the mandated hours of professional learning. Or release them during the school day, which then presents issues because they're not able to service kids.
Yes, I'm set.
Mrs. Guernsey.
Thanks. Is this appropriate time to go through the statement of account? Comments on that? I actually was looking at some of the FTE changes, and one that I would love to hear more about in particular is related to art at each of the high schools. I'm seeing a decrease in FTE. This is on page 1 of 50 under the statement of account detail by major classification. At the different high schools, like 23 to 25% decrease in FTE. So I don't know who can speak to that. Like, what is the reason for that? Why are we seeing such drastic?
Kids not choosing to take our classes.
So can we see, is it possible, because this is a concern of mine, because, I mean, I'll speak to this later, but when we're talking about building this art program, decreasing art in middle school, what are we offering in elementary school? What are we offering in middle school? And now we're seeing this hit our high school. That makes me concerned. And I'm wondering, we're offering more classes. So is that watering it down? So we're not getting it. Like, what is the issue here? How can we better understand it? Because that's a huge decrease in their offerings. And how many courses do people request that they didn't get? You know, how are we looking at this in a careful way so that we can support the visual arts?
Well, so part of it was the reduction was made based on the course requests, not on the classes that were built. So there was not an opportunity for kids that wanted it and because of the reduction didn't get it. So all the reductions that the schools made in the art allocation that they had to what they currently have now was based on kids not requesting the course.
And did you see a difference in these requests based on the additional courses we're offering that are categorized as art? Do you know what I'm talking about? We're identifying additional courses that are under the art classification that didn't exist before. Is that taking away from our work? Like,
I think it's just kids are choosing what's interesting to them. I think more kids are taking business courses, other areas, other academic courses. I mean,
I don't know, but that's a really big decrease, so that's something I would be interested in exploring further and
Thank you, Courtney, for the update. I'm in the FTE section on page 18, where we're looking at aides. And I was just curious, maybe through the chair to Mr. Sistani, on the ECC line. We see that we budgeted for 14 and I know there's a lot of movement in our aides and our pairs, and a lot of that's dependent on programmatics and IEPs. But we jumped from 14 to 21 for the ECC. Is there anyone can speak to that, just how we budgeted and where we are, and if there's any trend you're seeing, where that was reflected from? Maybe they're living somewhere else.
It's a cleanup, so if I.
You're up.
Yeah, the ECC in the past was, they were reflected in the location. So if they were at Burr, they were at Burr, so now you're seeing them as true ECC.
They're all just living in that one
They're living in
line.
the place they should, because it's district-wide ECC irrespective of their location.
So I would assume that would be the same thing, because CPP bumped a little bit too. Is that the same reason?
Yeah, it's.
I assumed it was some kind of trend. I just think it's important when you're looking at just kind of know where those are all living.
We'll footnote that in
Well,
a.
based on numbers, we were able to reallocate.
I would just request, to Ms. Max and Kelly's point, this is the first quarterly we're seeing. Any kind of shifts like that would kind of be helpful to see in a footnote. I just think when you're looking from our top level, quite often you're looking at trend, where things are and where people are living. I think it's important. To that same point,
to your point, the 14 should just read 21.
well, that's what I'm saying. But when you read it, you say,
Correct.
oh, we only budgeted for 14 and we need 21. What happened?
Say 21 because we did budget it.
For 21, they are just not all living that spot, right?
Those adjustments will be made.
I just think for the document, it's important. And then just above, I'm assuming this is the same thing on page 17, the 2 additional section, or it says teacher's classroom, budgeted for 0 modifications. I'm assuming that those are additional sections, were those additional?
I'm not on the page, I apologize.
Fine,
The one that-
127.
Okay. Oh, okay, you're looking on the summary sheet, line 27?
I think I'm saying one. No, I'm sorry. Tell me what number I should say.
17 of 50, and it's line 11, 1200,
Yeah,
127.
170. I'm sorry, I just realized I need readers about a week ago and I'm working on it.
On this page document, okay.
Thank you, Nick.
Oh, that's helpful. Teacher's classroom, 1100. Yeah, that's just, that's a good point. So that's 1200, 127. You know what this is? This is the open choice grant funded positions. So we decided to break it out. So before you would see them in the location in which they were, now you're seeing them.
So those are open choice. Okay, awesome. Thank you. All right, so I'll go to line 111319, just because this was a budget driver for a lot of us. I'm looking at Fairfield Woods in 8th grade. They're only at 2 science teachers, not 3. I just thought we were holistically making all the teams congruent. Is that?
Give us the page number.
I'm sorry. The page number is page 9, and the line is 11111314.
11113.
149, grade 8, Fairfield Woods.
So going from 8.
Budgeted actual, so.
So we have 8 budgeted teachers. We kept 8 budgeted teachers. At that point in time, there was a vacancy. I guess that was filled since this was run. So this was.
So we do have the full teams at all the
Yes.
middle.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
my question.
Oh, yeah.
We've got all teams. It was just
All
that.
3.
Awesome. Yeah.
All 3.
Wonderful.
So the next one will show that as a 3 then.
Was as a 3. Awesome. And then this is my last one. Just 11104112. It's on page 2 of the PDF. These are 2, I just don't remember these from last budget season. So maybe the humanities coach and the MTSS literacy lead teacher, those were, where those living or in our budget from our food budget.
Sure. So those are lines that were. Page 2. It says.
Humanities coach and MTSS literacy lead teacher up here. 0. These people just.
Those were, I believe, Fairfield Ludlow High School. Dr. Hatzis found offsets in FTE to reshift resources, and this is
So
what
these are new positions.
new positions per the request of the principal as a result of some offset
Okay.
personnel.
May I ask a follow-up to that? I guess that this is, to me, these two positions specifically, are bringing me right back to last year's, significant number of new positions for which there had been no board vetting. And this is almost $250,000 here of salary, when you also factor in, benefits. That this hasn't been vetted by the board at all. I don't understand why this couldn't have just been a savings. Dare I say, given back to the town, or sometimes we'll do the advanced purchasing. But to just see that we have a decreasing high school enrollment, it would have been appropriate to have an FTE reduction at the high school. Which is certainly something we did talk about last spring, of really taking a fine look at the scheduling process. So I don't understand why there just wasn't a straight up 2.0 reduction.
Well, we did wrestle back and forth with that. Dr. Hatzis did make some compelling arguments. It is something that we said we would revisit throughout the school year prior to this budget, so there still is a possibility of that in terms of savings, so this is
Thank
not
you.
Thank you.
committed in perpetuity.
Thank you, Mrs. Flynn.
I'm sorry.
I'm gonna follow up on that really quickly too.
got one more
We asked from Dr. Hatzis where the savings came from specifically in order to fund these two positions, and just, I mean, for future. And just obviously as in going into the budget, we'll get better explanation of just why they were needed or why he felt they were needed, you know, as the offset. So just for future, and that could be part of the next, just where that came from.
One more, I'm sorry. And then just line 11215-160, so that's on page 21. I have two quick ones on this. Number one, the crossing guards is in one chunk. In the past, it was broken out by locations. I just think it was good to know where the crossing guards are, especially in the conversations about streets, and that would just be a request. And then the line above it, 11215-160. So this was the security, just seeing some reductions here and kind of, I'm not really understanding, are those new security guards there? Is that something we didn't move forward with? I'm just curious.
We did not move forward as of yet. We had some issues with hiring at Walter Fitzgerald. And in the meantime, with change in leadership, the interim principal has asked that and agreed that we should put it on hold, that because we do have the SRO presence again, and with the restorative practice individual there, that we could hold off in moving forward.
Was I, just remind my memory, didn't we budget for 2 new security guards at each of the high schools?
One at each.
One at each high school,
Yeah, they're-
additional.
Yeah,
So
those
that's
are,
reflected here.
yeah, those are
We just
there.
didn't move forward with the others, so that's where
The
the,
other one.
thank you.
To your other question, I apologize, but on the crossing guards, they are broken out by location. This report is just the higher level.
Quick one.
report. Yeah, so it rolls up by major classification and then that,
Thank you.
yeah.
I appreciate the insight as we're asking questions.
When you see the budget, you'll see it by location because we do break it down by, I think, major categories, object, and then location.
That's all I have for the moment, but.
Anyone else? Mrs. Guernsey?
Speaking of Walter Fitzgerald, and I can't find it in here right now, I just didn't even know when I was looking through. It looked like there were 2 administrators.
Oh, yeah, it's just showing for the active, not the budgeted, so,
Where that is?
And I just made.
so that's a,
2 administrators.
There's not.
yeah, there's only one administrator, yeah.
Page 30, we budgeted for 1 and it says 2. For 144,000.
There's only one.
So is that an error in the report?
It's a executive issue because that's,
Yeah, it's an error in the report, correct?
okay.
Only one.
But there are 2 people being paid from the line, so it's reflecting that.
Right, so
That's
the whole.
I don't understand that, so I'm just want that on record. I don't.
Can we do that as a aside, like it's.
That's a personnel matter
issue.
that we're ironing out.
Personnel, that answers it. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Anything else, Mrs. Springfield?
No.
Mrs. Lynch, did you have your hand up
No,
again?
I think.
Okay, I have a few couple ones. Oh, sorry, Dave. Oh, sorry, Mr. Krasnoff.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
I apologize for being tardy. And maybe you covered this. I just have a few follow-ups on the transportation piece, similar to what I was talking about when we were doing the budget. It looks like we are anticipating some of the savings that I thought we would. We make sure we keep track of that and try to account for that money. I'd love to see the savings and not just reallocated other places if possible, so we can plan better for next year.
Yeah,
We're seeing savings as a result of runs not happening,
Oh, I get that.
but, and it's impacting, and prior to you walking in, it's impacting our afternoon runs and it's impacting our sports and activity runs. So any reflection of, at the end of the year, of savings is coming at a cost, where we can't operate optimally. So hopefully when we go out to bid, the competitive bidding process brings us in a better place so that we can operate the runs, because reducing any more from the transportation budget with the hopes of not running the runs is just a dangerous game.
you'll build it.
I completely get that. That was my concern. We were having trouble filling some of the runs last year, so I just felt it might carry over. Oh, with contract, things would be slightly different.
Well, it shouldn't happen with this contract, but unfortunately,
Get it?
we don't have control over some of the external factors with the vendor that are, because the same vendor is servicing a neighboring district and we're losing drivers to that district because they pay more, so.
And we are seeing and booking the additional revenues that, you know, you put forward in the budget for the free cash, which offset your budget too, so.
Anything else, Mr. Krasnoff?
I don't want to be ridiculous, so.
A quick question. I apologize for my ignorance. Who pays the bus drivers? So doesn't First Student pay them?
Right.
So they're paying them more to work in Westport than to work for us?
Correct.
Yeah.
And we've asked them to increase the pay for our drivers, and it's been a hard no.
Negotiated a contract.
They negotiated the contract, so that would eat into their.
When they got the contract, they based.
Got it.
They negotiate the Westport contract.
Right.
They could still give us.
Okay, I just have a couple. The pension issue, when do we normally get that from the town?
So we would normally have, I put it in the memo, I think it's.
Before the budgets.
Yeah, before the budget, right.
So,
Yeah,
is there a
January.
particular reason why it came in so late this year?
We have a new, actuary, we had a new actuary, so it came into place last year. So they took time on the valuation because it was their first year of doing it.
Do you anticipate for this year, though, we'll get it at our normal time?
Ask for it at our normal time and we should be getting it at our normal time.
We had that discussion at the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah.
That's why they restored us.
Okay, just hoping that we get that. on
Yeah.
time. Otherwise, budgeting.
The other concern was that we went up disproportionately, so we're gonna have those conversations as part of budget season because, you know, the broad explanation was because of the paraeducators' increased salary, but that doesn't explain to me the 12 . So either it was wrong in the past and they're right sizing it for. So we will start having those conversations because we are now in contact with Milliman and we regularly participate in those calls, so. Yep.
Great. And this might be a question to Mr. Testani or the renewal rates on our out-of-district tuitions. When do you receive those? Is it prior to budget book printing? Okay.
Before we even sat down.
No, we get those increases. This year, we got them in the summer. So we budgeted for like 3.5% and some of them came in at 9%.
At 9?
Yeah.
It was an average of 5, but.
So it would be helpful to have a legislative policy that we would require notification of some indication at least prior to January or something like that.
Yeah, that would be great, but the unfortunate issue is that every other district, because I'm on legislative committee I joined from CAPS, is that everyone keeps focusing on excess cost.
Right.
Excess cost, and because that needle's not moving, everything else around that is not being is being ignored.
Like the rates.
Rates, again, rewarding districts like ours who build in-house programming. Those are the things that we should be focused on, not how much reimbursement for sending kids out that we're getting back. So I'm trying as loudly as possible to redirect the conversation, because the same conversation's happening year over year and we're getting nowhere with that. So maybe we should try a new strategy.
Quick follow-up to that. Is that something that could be done as a standalone issue? I mean, again, I'm not the statute person, but any increase of over 1% must be notified blank months in advance kind of thing. That can just be a standalone. It doesn't have to be wrapped into a
Right.
holistic, work with the excess cost share or anything else. It could just be its own action.
Well, and I think part of the reason why, and you probably verify it, but these out-of-district placements are not dealing with collective bargaining. So they're able to pay employees. So in order to attract top quality in the shortage areas to service kids, they're just throwing money and then they're passing along the cost to us or the districts.
I hear your issue. I'm just with the notification piece is
Yeah.
problematic for everyone else in terms of trying to build a budget, and we're in a deficit now because of that late notice. I think it would be only fair if we're sending public school tax dollars to, right? I'm grateful that we have places to serve our kids. Not even about that, but it's about the notification piece of things. And if there could be some sort of, even if it's an initial estimate or something like we get with health insurance, and then as it gets down the line through the town boards, we get better information, like something that says, hey, we're looking at 4%, right? Or something. And I'm happy to advocate for that, but I think all districts would benefit from that kind of information prior to budget.
I could just, I'm sorry.
I just had one quick follow-up, but I don't want to interrupt your answer.
I just wanted to say, when we found out some of our outplacements, the increases, we were on the phone meeting. We were able to
I'm sure.
talk some of them back down to the current rate that we were getting.
One, wonderful to hear. Second, and I'm sure some of them are very highly specialized and there aren't many options, but is there any level of competitiveness of you serve this profile student and so do you, and not that I want to, promote upheaval for these students, but does that factor into it at all? That if something becomes simply too expensive, we have to move students from one location to another?
Depending on the severity of a student's needs, there are only a certain number of placements and that we work with that are within an hour's drive, Fairfield. And, all the other districts work with those places too. So some might have openings, some might not at a specific time. So, but yeah, there's limited places. Like our most expensive programs, there's probably three, schools that we work with on that, but that's where most kids who are outplaced by any other district would go to that profile.
On the topic of districts having something to offer, are we anywhere with Walter Fitzgerald of anyone from out of town?
Currently, we do not have any out-of-town tuitions at WFC, but we have had discussion over the summer. There was a potential. It didn't pan out, but we're always
curious.
We've offered it out. I've had that discussion several times. There has been, as Rob said, some interest. But also being very cognizant right now in transition of leadership, not to take on too many kids until we're in a better spot.
There's also talk at the state level of standardizing some of those tuitions, because you find that what one district charges varies from.
Really? They're scaling them?
For whatever reason, we're getting different rates than other districts. So the state needs to push on that. We can't push on that because officially we don't necessarily know what those rates are, but that's something that could be talked about at the legislative level as well.
Okay. One last question on this and then I'll move on. The counts. Are we at the outplacement count that we budgeted for? So is this entirely rate hike, or do we have upper or lower number of outplacements that we think we budgeted for 136?
We have, we have a few more outplacements.
Higher, where we were. Okay, all right. All right, and then I just have a couple. On page 36, Ms. Laborious, the reduction in the funding for the finance support and the accountant coordinator, is that moved somewhere else or page 36?
Yeah.
So kind of, it says CFO and then finance support and then the accounting. And there's some 51,000 and then those reductions.
One of those is, one of those positions was moved back to transportation, so it was a temporary transfer for 1 year of what was formerly a transportation secretary, was moved to finance support for last year. It's moved back to the transportation secretary line.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I don't, let's see. Analyst, that position's been done away with. Systems analyst.
You know, I was just asking about those two.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just those two. And Mr. Papa George isn't here, so I don't know if anyone knows the answer on the reduction of the maintenance drivers and workers. Page 37. I know there's a lot of ins and outs, we might be going to some other place. So the maintenance driver at the bottom, we had budgeted for 2, but there's 1, and the maintenance worker, we budgeted for 13, but.
Oh, that's just vacancies, sorry.
Those are vacancies, okay.
Yeah, because you see the approved budget is the first column, that's the board approved budget. The current modified is the modified what budget we're operating against. And the third column is the actual, so it's the active headcount.
So he's that they're vacant. Okay.
So a couple vacancies that he's currently hiring up on.
Okay, all right.
And that was as of September 30, so it was, some of them made it.
With the driver, we're unable to fill the vacancy because someone's out, and until that's resolved and whether they're gonna come back or not come back, we can't hire. So that may remain vacant in Q2 as well. We also have some other personnel issues that we're working through with HR and the union in order to be able to open up those for hiring. So those could sit in Q2, they could sit in Q3, they could sit in Q4.
Okay, gotcha. That's all. Anyone else have anything else? No? All right, thank you very much. All right, discussion of BOE 2025-2026 budget priorities. Well together, this is an opportunity that we do every year before the superintendent gives us some information on budget drivers for next year, an opportunity for board members to weigh in on things that they're thinking about for the next year's budget. So it's just an open floor discussion. Anybody has anything that they'd like to raise at this time? Feel free. Max and Kennelly.
So 2 things. So obviously I already raised the FTE issue and again, it's obviously, I would always like something like that to be through attrition. But to be able to see a small degree of savings, most specifically at the high school level, reflecting the fact that the enrollment is down and yet we have had no reductions there. And I'm also especially interested in that because I would be interested in the pricing and the discussion of the yonder pouches.
Funny you mentioned that. I spoke to 2 colleagues this morning who have introduced those, one at the middle school level and one at the high school level this year, and starting to get some feedback on that.
Very good to hear. I would love to learn from other people's mistakes before doing an investment like that.
Yep.
Mrs. Flynn.
Yeah, I definitely have an interest in looking at our capital outlay. Chromebooks was an investment that was done. I would say it's a good time to look at Chromebooks while we're looking at that investment year over year. SEL is something that's coming up. We've spoken to, Move This World, where that's going, possibly writing our own curriculum. I'd love to hear about that during budget. I was able to listen to the facilities committee meeting, and actually through the chair to Mr. Chastani, I'd love just to hear your thoughts on the engineer. I found that to be a really interesting conversation, whether that be just on our own or through the town. I don't know if you want to speak to it at all. I can't articulate your points, but I took them I thought they were well said.
Well, Yeah, so if you want to talk a little bit about that, my suggestion, and, had just very brief conversation that with the town in terms of hiring a construction manager in-house. With all these large projects that are coming up, we keep hiring owners reps for a ton of money, that look out for our best interests. But at that cost, I think if we're going to follow through in the next 5 to 10 years with all these major projects, I think it would be wise to at least see if we put out a posting, what kind of interest we would get from qualified candidates to be members of Fairfield Public Schools and represent us at the table rather than pay an outside entity.
I found it an interesting conversation and something that the full board, I just wanted to hear about it more. And then just lastly, after the conversations about flex, I definitely have an interest in hearing more about that FTE and how we're using that during that day, how it could be utilized. We heard how it's hitting certain target groups, but there's a lot of kids, it seems like, sitting using IXL, silent reading. I definitely have some interest of how we can use that FTE time more effectively.
Quick follow-up, what budget aspect to that?
If we need to add, the implication seemed to be that the inability to add more offerings during that flexible period was the lack of supervision. And a lot of that was getting thrown back at parent volunteers. I'm just curious to hear what would be the FTE support that would be needed to make the flex time more flexible. I think that's the simpler way to say it. If we're looking at middle school, that team approach, we kind of did that last year. I'm kind of interested in kind of looking at that schedule holistically. And high school too. I appreciate your points before. That's it.
Anyone else? Oh, sorry, Mrs. Guernsey?
Sorry. So one of the issues which I've spoke to several times at this table is this idea of restoring funding to the art program at the elementary level. That would be the minimum request that I'm looking for. But actually, I think that this really needs to be a more holistic review of our arts program. We do an absolutely phenomenal job with music. We are we're not meeting our national and state requirements in the area of visual arts. So that is of great concern to me. When I saw the reduction at the high school, I see that as, I don't have the data that you have, but I see that as a reflection of our inability to invest in that program, starting with our children when they're younger. That's my interpretation. I don't know if that's true, but I would like to look at that holistically. And the investment that we make in music is fantastic, but at the middle school level, we don't have any balance for the visual arts. So just at least looking at that would be important to me. So yeah, restoring the funding would be like the minimum, but really, even if we restore the funding at the elementary level, we still are so far below our national goals. This is Fairfield, so I just feel like we need to take a closer look at that. And the other issue that I wanted to talk about, and this is from the area of curriculum, has to do with the purchase or the pre-purchase of books. I love books, I support them. I know we had to purchase them ahead of time for ELA. That was a new precedent for us. We had never done anything like that before. I didn't feel comfortable with doing that. But I didn't think that we had a choice because of the way the state had mandated that we use that as built curriculum. When I heard that we were making this shift for world language, it gave me deep concern, not because I am opposed to a textbook, but the order that we're building curriculum, because Fairfield has never built curriculum from textbooks. They've always built a curriculum and then used textbooks to support it. So for me, this is like the wrong order. And if I'm misunderstanding and we can no longer do that, then we've missed that opportunity for the discussion at this board table about why we would be shifting that philosophy. And maybe we can't do it anymore. Maybe our staff are unable to do it. Maybe our director of curriculum thinks that's not the best way anymore. But as far as I know, we've never done this before. So it makes me really concerned. And if that comes up in our budget discussion, I would be leery to support that massive purchase, not having a chance for that conversation.
Just to piggyback a little bit, we made a massive purchase of $250,000 for world language a few years ago on digital resources that are they're not really sitting, that are being unaccessed because teachers don't know where they fit So I think when you look at standards and teachers are able to evaluate resources that align to the standards, and then you write the curriculum so that those resources are incorporated into the curriculum, you're going to get them used with fidelity. When you're just out there purchasing things, hoping they fit in, we've wasted $250,000 there because we were able to, since they're digital, we can look at clicks. And we've wasted, I don't know, before my arrival, how much we wasted in math. So I think that's the error that we end up with later on. No one talks about it because I think people are afraid to bring up what money's been wasted. So I think being proactive and saying, before we start writing curriculum, we need to write something into the curriculum. I think that was evident when we were doing the ELA, especially for the secondary level. We wanted to explicitly reference textbooks, certain or novels and things like that, so that we were able to make sure that that is being taught. You can't do that if you're just going to write curriculum. What do you pull from? I mean,
my point is that we have never done it this way before, and I don't
Exactly.
think math is a great example because I think we would all agree that that was a debacle. We pulled back on that, so I'm
unfortunately-
trying to explain that I have a problem with proving that because we skipped over that discussion. I mean, I'm the curriculum liaison and this is like news to me. So when this was built 2 years ago, when we started talking about world language, there wasn't a discussion. And of course, we'll be purchasing however many hundreds of thousands of dollars of textbooks prior to that project. So I just don't appreciate the surprise. And it's going to be, I would imagine, a very large amount of money.
Well, it's going to be a good chunk of money, but it's, at least we know it's going to be aligned with the standards. It's going to be written into the curriculum and it's going to be used by our teachers and our students. There's a guarantee. The other way, like I said, the district prior to my arrival, the department spent $250,000. We might as well have flushed it down the toilet. And I don't think necessarily, I hate to use, the word debacle with math, maybe how it would all played out, but the illustrious math is being rolled out in districts in Fairfield County, starting in 3rd grade and having great success. So I don't, but I think if you do things in the right order and done collectively and collaboratively with the people that need to teach our students that are in front of our students every day, this can be really effective. But if we do this in vacuums, and I know Fairfield's never done it that way, but.
So I would like to see that sales pitch because I don't know that I buy into that. It might be that that's what we need to do now, but it's not something we've done in the past. So as a board member, I feel like that kind of precedent for us to set it, I need to feel confident that that's really the right direction. I don't feel confident about that now.
I could just add, academic officer. I can't speak to prior to my arrival either, but generally the textbook gets vetted before the curriculum gets written. The board doesn't generally see it that way because you get both documents at the same time. You get a curriculum and you get a textbook approval. Social studies is in it now and they are vetting textbooks as we speak. So these things usually happen simultaneously when they come to you. There's a lot of backup work as well. I do know in speaking with some former curriculum liaisons, 2011, 2012 perhaps, they did supposedly build curriculum and then purchase textbooks. And to Mr. Testani's point, found that the two did not fit. So the textbook sat on the shelf and the curriculum packets are made for it in order to implement that. One of the pillars, I would say, of good curriculum development is having high quality instructional materials for the students. Otherwise, your teachers are left to pick things for their classroom, some good, some bad. There's been a lot of research reports on the choosing of materials, and the ones on the internet, more than half of them are generally considered not meeting standards when they're not vetted. So I just wanted to add that the process generally follows this way. It just may not be known publicly of how it had occurred. You see it in the curriculum documents where we put resources. Those generally don't come after the standards and content. They come within the same time as building it.
Just quickly, so ECC, I know this was, you know, a focal year. So I would like to see in the budget just any build outs of ECC, possibly any additions that we could make for the next year. I have gotten, parents ask me about possibly building out the class size of the ECC classrooms. So to just possibly looking into that and just really seeing, you know, additions that have been made. I know some people are paying, you know, paying for ECC and some are not. So I just like that to be really dug into in this budget cycle as well. And just to get the numbers and the, like, really, so we can dig deep into that.
So question on, just to follow up so I'm clear, we talking more about full day programming?
The full day programming, and then to just, I want to also be able to dig deep into the half day too, and just, you know, see the numbers behind it and the advantages and disadvantages.
It would be helpful too. We normally have a specialized programming update before we even start the budgets. It's kind of hard sometimes to have some of those discussions while you're talking about the money. You want to be able to have some of that without the money attached to it necessarily. So that usually does happen, you know, maybe November or even early December. So we can, you know, ask Mr. Testani if that would be get an update on all the specialized programming again and just what the enrollments look like and all of that before we even get into the budget. And
that would be
sort out some of that beforehand.
Absolutely. I think that's just an area to dig into and really have a good look at.
It's just ECC, not the other ones, like CLCs or anything like.
No, that would be great as well, but just ECC is top of mind, so our top priorities.
You mind follow? Sure. Just to follow up, I think it's a really good point. I also am interested in keeping a look at how we are looking at our ECC in terms of, you know, this balance between adding to our operating budget and then finding the space to accommodate it in the actual footprint of our district. So I also want to be really cautious that if we are seeing a bump and there is a real interest in full day programmatics, that to me is a confirmation that we are moving in a certain direction and need to continue moving in a certain direction. But I also want to be really cautious about, you know, not overstepping, what's the phrase, which I'm not a big skier, like overstepping our skis and not funding things that we aren't going to have space for.
Exactly.
I think it's a great idea.
Presnott, did you have fun?
Yeah, just a few. One, I want to echo what Ms. Flint said. I do think an engineer would be very beneficial. So I think we should talk to the town. Because we've been trying to accomplish a lot, and I think help without having to hire a consultant every time. We may not even completely get what we're trying to direct them to do versus someone in-house would be very smart. In addition, I would love to look at the amount of exams that we're giving students in general across the board. I know you said you were going to try to, if we can, eliminate certain ones, but I'd love to see that and how it can be done. And I would love to see any opportunities we can go a little greener, even if it's a little costly up front. If we can see long-term savings, I'd love to just see the differences. If it made sense to go a little greener.
Anyone else? I don't want to reiterate things that I've already said. The only one I'm going to reiterate is that transportation is clearly an issue. And I think several committees now are talking about transportation and we're going out to bid. And just, Mr. Testani, when do you anticipate, if you know, I'm not sure if you know, that we would have an answer on that?
The proposal to go out, solicit someone to come in and help write the RFP was with the town attorney last week. I believe that should be going out any day now. Because we want to make sure that we have some, we don't have the capacity to solicit all the input that it takes to write an RFP for transportation.
Will you have it by the budget, do you think? Like an answer, an actual contract or bids?
By the time the budget comes,
Yeah.
probably not. But we're gonna have to make some assumptions based on some of the contracts that have been negotiated in surrounding districts, so.
Okay.
We are talking as a group in Southern Fairfield County, because a lot of folks have been in the same boat or are going to be. So we do have some factors that we can probably and good assumptions in terms of what we can figure conservatively where we're gonna land, as you can imagine.
Right. That's just an area of concern for sure. I echo some of the other ones as well, but we can go into that. Any last calls on that? Okay, thank you very much. So you'll be up next time, but easy to know about. All right, first reading of policy 5114, suspension and expulsion. Did I skip something?
Calendar.
Oh, well, don't want to skip that. All right, first reading of the 25-26 student calendar. Hello, Dr. Parrish.
Hello, good evening. Secretary Parrish, Deputy Superintendent. I have before you the proposed 25-26 calendar, which was based on the draft of the regional calendar created by CES. Again, it does include 182 student days, 187 teacher days, with the school year beginning on August 26th and ending on June 11th. Within the calendar itself, to one of the questions that was brought up earlier in reference to looking at how breaks and days are scheduled. The return from winter break, you'll notice, is after it would have been on the 2nd, which would have potentially caused concerns, both student and possibly staff-wise as well. And so that was taken into consideration, and thus the last day of school being the 11th of June.
We also looked at carefully the start of the school year with holidays in September. We wanted to make it as consistent as possible to get into a routine. So we did not put any half-day PDs in there. We do have conferences in October. So we were very strategic to try to make sure that there was more consistency of teaching and learning as many weeks as possible throughout the school year. And I think we were able to accomplish that by spreading things out a little bit more and cutting back where we could.
Just, so one concern, I noticed right away is the April break. And so there's Good Friday off, which is April 3rd, and then a week of school, and then a week off. And would it be, because I know, I'm just thinking, you know, in New York and Ohio, my sisters are teachers, and so they have Good Friday and then the week after off.
So CES puts out a regional calendar, and everyone in the region will stick to that calendar, similar to New Haven County with ACES and such. So that is the week all of our surrounding media area will have. So if any shift in that, we'll have teachers off when their kids are not off and vice versa.
It also impacts our students that attend some of the programming at CES, so they would have a week off from CES and then another week off from us.
So the Aqua kids would have
They only miss 1 week between, so like those that go to the Aqua school or some of the other programming that's run by CES. We did move it the week before CES. They would have 2 weeks of school that they would miss as opposed to just 1.
And just to follow up on that, I mean, it's a really good point. Has there ever been feedback to them to connect the two? Because it just makes sense.
No, break is typically not that early, the week of the 6th. They typically try to always make it that second full week of April. That's pretty much, in looking back, has been the standard across.
The year was connected to Good Friday.
Yes.
It was like awesome.
This past year, it was just because of when Good Friday falls, because it fluctuates all over. I think it was last year, it fell the Friday before break, and one other year it actually fell during break, so I think this year it actually might be in March. But it varies.
I'm not asking you to call the Pope.
I mean,
I am wondering if CES can consider in the future connecting the two, because then you get like the extra weekend, then it just makes sense.
It is.
It's possible, but again, Good Friday is not always in April.
I hear you. It was in March a couple of years ago, so it was super early. I get it. Mr. Reese, I'm sorry, you had a follow-up?
that was the point I was gonna make. It's every year, the Easter holiday and Friday falls, so if we tried to make them, I agree with you.
Yeah, where in
But
April?
feasibly, it's not gonna be a hill to die on, I don't think.
This is Mexican County.
And I don't know, through the chair to Mr. Krasnoff, I don't know if this is something that could be broached with them, but so what if it's not the same time? Move the week. If it's going to, there was, I don't know, 5-10 years ago, we did move our calendar so that break, because it's the only substantial break of the second semester we had, we moved it to the end of March. We then had to rescind that vote and move it back because it was a bad idea. But in place of trying to more evenly place it, and also quite frankly, even if it were earlier, that could probably be better for a lot of our spring athletes, but that's beside, because they get nothing now. But I mean, my view would be, so adjust the break to when Good Friday is. If it's the last Friday in March, then we move it up. It's a better place for it. But I don't know if that's something that they even
Can I
have as
ask
a
them?
conversation.
I think it depends on what some of the other districts are doing.
But usually everybody waits for CES. And I know they have it written somewhere that they're always shooting for that second full week in April. They stick to that quite, religiously. And I don't understand why they should feel the need to do so, because it really does make sense if it can be wrapped with Good Friday.
I can ask them.
As an educator, sure, if it was the last full week in March, from there until the end of June, be a long haul. An extremely long haul.
But they've already had a long haul from January, February, and March.
Well, we have days in February. And then obviously March is a little bit of a stretch there, but.
Just, I know we don't have a choice in it. It's just, it would be nice.
We can let them know. Fairfield
That's all I'm
Board
asking,
wants
is if
to
we.
switch everyone else's calendar.
And so.
No, their calendar, upon which we make our decisions.
Can ask.
Okay, Mr. Reese.
Don't you dare.
Yeah, so since 2017, I've been trying to bring back February break, and I'll probably make another motion this year, so just throwing that out there. With regard to the number of snow days, I think we might want to consider making that 5 this year, so that the last day of school couldn't potentially fall on Juneteenth, and that since we have not had to encounter that, it just might be a simple.
Isn't 6th, I'm sorry, Nick, isn't 6th the 18th?
No, 12th to then the 19th.
Yeah, if we had 6 snow days, we would be. Yeah, so just those 2 points.
I'm sorry, clarification. You said the first 5, and what was the other point? February break?
Yeah, I'd like to try and figure out a way to extend February break.
Let's go follow up, Mr. Reese.
Sure.
By changing other dates or by adding on to the end?
I have to come up with it. Every year I try to come up with
Okay.
something and it never flies, but I will try to have something in advance of the November 12th meeting for everybody to see if I'm gonna do that, so.
There's also the policy, the calendar policy that also limits the extension of the school year.
Yeah, I know, but last year I believe I lowered the number of snow days just historically because we haven't been having them. So I think I grabbed a couple from there, hoping that it wouldn't take away from April break.
Thanks for the jinx.
Well, I've been jinxing it every year and it hasn't made a difference, so.
I think if
It's 80 degrees today on October 22nd.
If you're going to try to find a February break, let's not extend the school year.
Yeah. We always, we just get concerned about the APs don't move, and that's a concern. So Mrs. Maxon Kennelly.
Yeah, a couple things. First, I was gonna suggest that going forward, our drafts of the calendar and maybe even online, that there be an online link directly to the school account, to the policy, so that if someone ever starts to ask, why can't we do X, Y, or Z? That is readily accessible to, I mean, if it weren't, as long as it is, I would love to see the verbiage, but this is such a beautiful, nice one pager. But I just think it would be a helpful reference so that it is clear and transparent to people that we are now working within parameters. So that was the first thing. Second, I always ask this, and have always, but if there can be any brief discussion through the chair, Mr. Testani, when we vote on this calendar, just confirming the good use of these half-day for professional development. You know, I'd even love to hear, I ask for it again every year, you know, some examples of this is how this time has been used, because we know for a fact that anytime we have early release, it is inconveniencing thousands of families. And so just to have a confirmation of, hey, and this is what we worked on this year, because obviously it changes from one year to the next. But just, putting it out there that if we could hear, I don't know if it's something you're ready to speak to now, because I didn't submit that question ahead of time, but I would be interested in hearing that next time, just so that we can speak positively to, no, this is a really good, and I know that's what staff will say, but I'd love to hear some specifics.
Sure, we can do that, but we do have mandated hours of state PD that.
And that could very well be the answer, that those were things that were not taken care of in August and that are still residual and need to be done.
There's not the time in August to get all of it done, and some of it you do want to do throughout the year. So for example, restorative practices training. It's a lot of time that has to be carved out in order to train everyone throughout the district. Some of that can be done.
Mandated for everyone?
Yes, it's part of the new legislation. Comes under the school climate policy that everyone has to be.
What's coming?
So examples from this year, you know, we launched the K-12 literacy, pre-K-12 literacy. A lot of time has been dedicated for that across all levels. You know, there's still work being done in the other departments, even though they're not newly approved curriculum. So the math department have PD across the board. So it really just varies by year in terms of what the main focus is for that year, but there are definitely some legislatively required trainings and those that are in support of our ever developing implementation guides which support the approved curriculum.
All right, so then a couple of follow-ups to that. One, do you still maintain that November 4th, if we're gonna have a full day of no school and a full day of PD, that the timing of that is what serves the district best?
I think looking at the calendar, the timing of it, we didn't want it to make it too early. And given that those 3 days in October are really around conferences for K-8 and then the PSAT for the high school, we really wanted to make sure that it came at a point where we could have some meaningful engagement in PD, but also have the time. Even on the half days, it's a challenge between transporting, packing up your classroom, having to go to one location. There's time in transit, so by the time you get there, get engaged, some of that time has already been used up, and you're also coming to teachers when they're finishing the entire, they've been teaching for most of the day. So having that dedicated time on November 4th, 5th, whatever it is, that election day time is beneficial because you have that uninterrupted chunk of time where they can actually engage in a variety of different activities without those interruptions or the heaviness of having taught for half a day or the whole day, which is what we have on the regular staff meeting days.
I guess I just would have wanted to hear that the timing is what drives that, as opposed to, well, it's conveniently a day where the students aren't in the building.
It's a little bit of both.
Okay.
It's a little bit of both.
Okay, and then my last question was about, someone's got to clarify. I know we had some discussion last year regarding these half days and trying to condense something, and you needed to get assurance that we could fit it. And now for the life of me, I can't remember what that discussion was. I don't know if anybody else remembers it either.
Oh, the conferences, the elementary school.
But how is this any different? Like, what, there was something we were trying to do differently last year.
So we did do something differently this year, and that was, rather than have the 3 in October, we spread it out where half of the conferences are on election day. And feedback's not great on it. So we went back to the 3 days, but then we took away another half day. So it was a net zero there.
Can I ask a follow-up to that?
And as you'll see, there's the 3 conference days in October, we have the 3 in March. And then other than that, we only have 3 other early release days for professional development. So we did take into consideration how many days were early release.
Okay.
So we are minimizing.
Thank you. I couldn't figure out what it
Yeah.
was that we had done.
I can't remember, to be honest, either, and I had this question kind of scribbled down, and now that you said it, it's at the top of my mind, and I would just love a little bit of insight. I know for the dates in, once again, I'm buying readers. The 21st and the 23rd are pre-K through 8 conference days. I know conferences aren't offered to all 6th through 8th grade students. They're usually by invitation, or it's not like for K through 5, you sign up for a conference, you're offered a contract. It's a little bit different at middle school. I would love to know what percentage of students are having a conference in the fall for middle school.
Information.
Oh, I'm not expecting it in any way, but Ms. Maxon Kennelly's point kind of harkens to that idea that it is disruptive for a tremendous amount of families. And when you look, now we're having 1, 2, 3 conference days, the 4th. I would just love to look at any data that would maybe indicate that we could use that day for instruction.
Are
6 to 8.
required.
Like, does 6 to 8 need 3 days, or do they need 1?
Okay, I just want to make sure. we weren't
Curious,
trying to
if we're
eliminate
only
it.
servicing 60 students, I'm just making.
Hold on, let her finish.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to make sure you weren't looking to eliminate it, because then we would be in
No,
violation.
I'm just curious the percentage of middle school students that receive a conference or request a conference. So if we're seeing a really small amount,
Could reduce it to 1.
if you reduce to 1, then
For those grades.
we're just for 8, it's just for 6 to 8. K through 5, I totally understand pre-K through 5. I hope that's right. Thank you.
But to Dr. Parrish, were you saying that we're required to have those
We're
multiple?
supposed to have no, not the number of days. I wanted to make sure the ask wasn't to eliminate.
No.
Okay,
No,
want to make
not
sure.
in any capacity.
I think the point is that if we don't need to release 6 through 8 students on 3 days and they can be in school, if you maybe just need 2 of those.
Or 1, I would just be curious.
I can see like maybe parents can't necessarily make 1 day, so 2, like
No,
at least.
I just want to clarify, my middle school in K through 5, you are offered a conference. In middle school, you are invited to a conference. You can then follow up and request a conference. But it's not like everybody's signing up for, I'm curious what percentage of students are signing up for or are requesting or invited to a conference.
Mr. Kresnov.
Since we're trying to be as inclusive as possible, we've gotten some emails about Diwali. I would just love to see the amount of students that are absent on those days, just for my info.
Provided that in previous years, so we can,
Thank you.
yeah, we did it last year when we
I
added,
just want to be fair to everyone like we did last year with Eid.
Well,
but they're,
I'm gonna have to then, and not to be insensitive, but if we're gonna be fair to everyone, we're talking about not releasing kids early on a half day. But now we're gonna ask 9,200 students to stay home.
No, I'm not saying we should definitely make it a holiday. I want to see the statistics of who's not at school. Like who's not coming in on those holidays.
Like for a few years, maybe?
Yeah. Just for an idea of,
Yeah, well,
we have 200 kids not coming to school.
So
To me, that's a large number of our population.
that's
2%.
that's more than, we have more than that every single day.
I understand that.
No, I get your point. I'm
not
just
sure that
saying,
You'll be able to, will you be able to actually decide, unless they report the absence for that purpose?
correct, we won't know.
so
You won't actually know.
You would have an idea if there's a spike versus a normal.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that might tell you something. Yeah, I hear you.
I just want to be fair to all religions.
yeah, I wanted to add to that because I was going to speak to Diwali as too. We've got obviously a lot of messages, and so evaluate, that as an important day for parts of our community. But just also speaking to the specific emails that I received, some of which were from adults that neither worked in the school system nor had students in the school system. So it's very clear to me really what the impact is. So yes, wanting to know the number of students. When I looked at the data from Eid that the parish supplied with us, it was very helpful to me because we were able to see that spike. It was like a 42.9% increase the day of Eid, and it was specific to that, that calendar. And it was, I think it was longitudinal too. So that kind of data is important, but also the staff, if there are any staff that are affected by that. I just have no idea because like I said, the information we're getting, it's not even clear if there are people that are associated with this public schools.
It would be the same way with the staff if they don't
Right.
indicate, so it would just be an absence.
So, thank you. Sorry, can I have one?
Oh, sorry, Mrs. Quincy.
Right on. Okay. I was also going to just recommend that we add, on the calendar, that we add the day of Juneteenth as a reminder to the community, because I think it's something, I mean, I would have liked to see it on here for my own benefit, just as we work later in June as a reminder. It would be helpful for me to just have it on the calendar, not as a day off, but to indicate that it is, that it exists. Thank you.
All right, thank you,
I
everyone.
have one more.
Oh, sorry.
So this is always a hot topic, but I would be curious to know, and I'm not sure if this is something that could be provided in the next week or so. If it's too much work, don't bother. But I'm curious what other surrounding districts do for Veterans Day. We've maintained this day as a day off for years, and I've supported that. But I also know that I want to say, be honest with you, I fear that our kids and these next generations are not necessarily grasping and understanding the importance of that day and what these people have sacrificed for our country. And I'm wondering, in the districts that do not have it off, is there any way to know if they have any kind of policy or guideline that there must be lessons around that for that? Because I'd be interested. I would never want to just do away with the holiday. If we ever broached the idea of taking away the day off for veterans, I would want to make sure that it was dedicated in some way or form, at least a majority portion of the day towards a veterans lesson kind of activity. So
There is legislation. It's already state required. If you have school on any of the state that designated holidays, and there must be programming in terms of that. So that's in the law, right?
and I'm curious how that plays out in our surrounding districts. Yeah,
Like you're saying, if they sing 2 songs in the morning, that's not what you're talking about.
exactly.
Right.
So the law may be one thing and you just kind of check a box.
Yeah, right.
That's not what I'd be looking for.
Yeah, I hear you.
I can get that information to you. Give me a few days, I'll reach out and we always have, are able to gather that from probably 19 of the surrounding districts will respond.
Okay.
Can I follow up? I wholeheartedly support that. In a prior life, I worked in a district that was in school on Veterans Day and
Just, sorry to interrupt you, just to be clear, I'm not necessarily
I'm
suggesting.
not saying that either.
So supporting me, I'm not sure what you're supporting.
No, supporting-
I'm just saying, okay,
Gathering the data.
okay.
100%. I think it's super important. It's something I would be holistically in support of. What I would recommend is, and I actually don't know if this invitation goes out to the full board because I was not a member last year, but Mr. Testani attended, and I would highly encourage anybody to look into what is done at some of our schools. I can speak to North Stratfield, does an extensive Veterans Day programmatic that week, including a white table ceremony, and heavily embeds Veterans Day into the curriculum. And I've seen it firsthand in my home, the impact it has, as a parent that attends it, the impact it has, the feedback we've gotten from every elected official, veteran that attends, and I would emphatically support that in our district in totality. So that's what I was supporting, Mr. Asa, just looking into what is being done.
I can echo the ceremony there is outstanding. The kids, families that participate, the veterans that are representative of grandfathers, uncles, fathers, moms. To do that on actual Veterans Day, I think would have enormous significance. I know some of the veterans I've heard in the past would disagree, but we'll get an idea of how many districts we're talking about, because I'm gonna go out and guess that there's more in school that day than not anymore. I think they've seen the importance of on that day having programs rather than on surrounding days. How about Greenwich?
On this one piece, if anyone is gonna be making any amendments, maybe just share that with anyone in case anybody else is making an amendment, and then it changes, counts and things like that, so everyone's kind of aware. It's a kind of a collaborative, so that everyone kind of needs to know ahead of time, if you can. One shift somebody else's, so. All right, thank you. First reading of policy 5114, suspension and expulsion review process.
Sure. So you've all had, I mean, obviously there's a decent amount of reading here. Very little, if any of which was crafted by the policy committee. We were big on changing the outline format. But other than that, a lot of this was simply what new definitions are and new implementation are. But obviously if you're affected by this policy, this is a very important policy. It's just not one where we have a whole lot of latitude. But still, it'd be good to get any questions answered. If you have any now, I'd be happy to take a shot. But otherwise, first of all, just one reminder, if you're ever thinking of us in comparison with other districts, this was a decision that we made in 2011, 2012, which is anything that's an expulsion. We have a hearing officer come in. You'll know that other districts, if you hear of this, it is true. Some districts choose to have Board of Ed members do it. But we made that change because it was, one, very hard to get a quorum of Board of Ed members who could be available during the school day to hear an expulsion hearing. And secondly, it is by its nature a bit capricious then, in terms of you get these certain board members, the hearing could go one way and it might not be the same way with a different board. I'm just kind of saying that more because there are some new members here. But that is a decision that we made over a decade ago. That was not part of this policy change. It's just because we're on the topic. I thought I'd bring that up, but if there are any questions, be happy to hear it. Teresa?
Yeah, through the chair to Mr. Testani, do you have any input on this? Is the administration comfortable with the way this is drafted?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Especially since they did the drafting.
No, that's not sure.
No. Good question.
Since we're not as involved.
Yeah.
All right, next one, first reading of policy 5141.231, psychotropic drug use per the policy audit.
Yep, so again, this is coming, as you can see, by all of the red language versus what was a much more succinct original version. And again, this was not something that policy really had much of a hand in terms of crafting. It was, what are we required to do? The audit pointed out that this needed this update. And so this was one of those 2004 ones that truly needed quite a bit of change to it.
Questions? All right. First reading of policy for deletion 6141.313.
So this is, and refresh my memory, correct me if I'm wrong, this was a duplication, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so this one, it's not that we don't care for homeless students or have policy guiding staff and the district on homeless students, that this was a duplicate.
All right, for any questions on that one? All right, first reading of policy for deletion 5143.2, accidents.
Duplicate. And again, thank you to Mr. Peterson for catching this one. The audit did not catch that one.
Okay.
You changed the language on the duplicate.
So we were talking about you in absentia, so that when we talked about those first read policies, I did bring up accidents and brought up the fact that in policy, we did talk about for the draft bit that we're keeping, that we did play with the language, talk about it, try to refine it, talk to staff, and ultimately made no changes. But I want to assure you, it had a robust discussion. Ultimately, we couldn't come up with a better way to define accidents that wouldn't then either bind the hands of like, all right, well, it's not in this definition, therefore we're not informing, or it's ultimately we fell back on staff knows when they have to let us know versus not. And if they don't, they'll get that feedback.
If I remember correctly, you did change the heading though, so it's a little different.
I
think you did.
That I'd have to go back and check.
No worries. This is the same one.
But we did talk about it right before you got here.
Sorry, I apologize.
No, quite all right.
First reading of policy 5.1 class size.
Okay, so where do I start? All right, so we've obviously been tossing this around for a few months. The feedback that we got when we brought it to the full board, again, this is one of those policies where the three of us alone wrestling with it, it was just, this is too important an issue. This is something, who doesn't have an opinion on this? So we did bring it to the full board, not for a read, but because we wanted your feedback on very specific issues. And we literally went through, I think all three of us rewatched the video to make sure we were counting how many people said this, how many people said that. This was ultimately the policy that we brought forward. It did come forward on a 2-to-1 vote. I just want to acknowledge that. And we did want to reflect what the full board said, as well as then take some input to a degree from staff in terms of what was needed to make this work. And so that's the policy that you have before you today. I do very much want to emphasize that if there's a tweak here or there in terms of amendment, of course, that's what you're always welcome to do with policy at our next meeting. Obviously, any suggested amendments, it would be wonderful to have that in advance. If we really have it in advance, policy could look at it next week, but I'm not assuming that everyone can stop what they're doing and turn this around in 2 days. And then there's also always the option that if at the November 12th meeting, the conversation of this is, and obviously we can start that conversation now, but if some of it is too substantial, then it is well within the rights of the full board to say we want to send it back to policy. Please work on this part. So again, because this does represent quite a change from past practice, and not past practice, the past policy, which was not something we were paying any attention to whatsoever. We were going by the guidelines that the district followed as opposed to Board of Ed policy. So all that being said, I turn it over to the board.
Lisa?
Yeah, so on the back page, this, and Mrs. Maximilian, I did email this to you, so you have it in writing. I have a little confusion on this, and I'm just wondering if you can clarify. So where it says if enrollment increases above the elementary class size threshold K to 5 of any grade from the first day of class on. So that was my first thing that caught me. And another section is not added. The full-time 1.0 paraeducator, which I know we talked about before, will be provided until a certified teacher is hired. Did I miss something, or is this new that now we're saying, before I remember in the discussion, they said they were gonna add a para, but now we're saying we're gonna add a certified teacher, even if they don't have their own brick and mortar classroom?
And that was, correct me if I'm wrong, that was the recommendation of staff that we do that. And so the idea being that to better serve these students and also the whole grade, because obviously the whole grade is full, that this was the recommendation.
So the way that I read this is if we're at, let's say, 23 students at that cap for that grade, 2 months into the school year, you have one more student that moves in, that pushes that, then we're going to hire.
We're gonna post.
I'll just throw it out that I have major reservations about that. No disrespect to administration or staff, but I have serious reservations about that. And I do appreciate the first.
May I follow up?
Yes.
So are the reservations of a budgetary nature, of a qualified applicant nature, or of an academic value?
Possibly all three.
Okay. And I know I interrupted you, I'm sorry.
No, but it's just, I was starting to wrap my head around the idea of the para. But now I'm saying, well, now a class is gonna have 2 full-time certified teachers. I don't know how that. I don't even know how that plays out.
Can I follow up, Mrs. Maxon County? So the following sentence too was something that was from the previous board input. We did leave that language in there primarily dedicated to the class, because remember some of us was like, it was gonna be dedicated to that class that's over versus Mrs. Castani's point, making it available to the whole grade level. So that piece is also language, Smith, in terms of what we did here, but we did ultimately bring it back to the board around it being primarily dedicated to that class, meaning not exclusive to that class.
Yeah, I mean, I just personally think it's bananas to add a full-time FTE for one student to go over if it comes in the middle of the year. I can't grasp my head around. Are there any follow-ups to my comment? I see Mr. Krasnoff's hands up. I have a couple other comments.
Kind of a follow-up, so I could.
A follow-up or not? If it's a different comment, then we'll wait for Mr. Ace.
Okay, all right. And I appreciate back to the front page, the first two bullet points at the elementary. The superintendent shall make all decisions on expansion based on the staff and space availability from the first day of classes to the 7th. So the way I'm reading this, correct me if I'm wrong, is we are giving the superintendent the discretion. But if there is space available and if there's the possibility, where does the judgment start coming in? So if we're gonna have the superintendent in this policy be making the decisions, what, is it an ultimate decision? Or are we gonna have the board coming after whoever superintendent is at that time? Because I'm thinking down the road.
I gotcha.
And saying, well, wait a minute, what do you mean you didn't have the staff? What do you mean you didn't have the space? And now I'm thinking of, I don't know. So I don't know if you can decipher what I'm asking, but.
So this is language that took a few drafts to get to this language. I would say that it was initially a little bit more prescriptive but what we finally landed on was we were trying to hypothetical scenario 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's where we arrived at this of we need some discretion in there. The board cannot know all of the ins and outs of what's happening in the building. There is, if we say you must expand in this scenario, meanwhile you have a situation such as that, there was no other classroom for it. And other dynamics that work there, and including staff input itself on, how they felt they could best serve those students. So that's where we arrived at this.
So I understand the space constraint, but I have serious reservations about the staff because what does it mean based on staff?
So for example, which bullet point is it? If you look at the second bullet point on the back, side B, the district shall not collapse any K-5 section after the end of the day prior to the first day of classes. My head spins when I get back into that wording.
Before school.
Right, unless, notice this, because that was something that the board had a strong opinion regarding collapsing. But in dealing with the reality of what's going on in those first days, notice after that, unless doing so on or before the first day of classes and through 7 calendar days, in the superintendent's discretion, it's necessary to fulfill the expansion of another. So that was one of those things where we're trying to deal with the reality of if we collapse you by one section and that enables us to expand elsewhere, that might be the one scenario where collapsing makes sense.
Okay, and you just said it though, the one scenario. So if we were tying that to this, the back to the front points, I can be on board with that. But what I worry about, the call to say, what if we don't have that situation and what does staff availability? Does that mean that we have people in the pipeline that we now have to have the superintendent go higher or not? And that's my fear about the wording of this, because I totally understand if we're collapsing a section and we're in-house moving somebody, that makes sense operationally, budget-wise, everything. But if we don't have that situation, the way I read this is based on staff, well, that could mean, who is to say that you don't say Mr. Superintendent or Mrs. Superintendent? Did HR have a list of people and could you have hired that? Like, that's my.
Well, I think, here's the thing, by the moment you start adding superintendent discretion, you therefore automatically, that includes public feedback and Board of Ed feedback. But that was also, I think, administration preferred to be in the position, and I think we felt that it was only right to empower them, that, yeah, there could be something that happens where a decision gets questioned, but that's certainly what happens now. And the contrary possibility of our being, just wait for wait for Mr. Ace's snow days to hit. You want to get second guess, wait for a snow day. But it's, I agree with your point, but ultimately, if you want to be in possession of the power of discretion, it means you're also open sometimes to negative feedback. And so it seemed more important to give that discretion than to say, we're completely absolving central office because we, the board, know exactly how to predict every scenario. And that's what had us coming back to this.
Well, I appreciate the answers to my questions, and
I do apologize. I did get your email in plenty of time and I just didn't get to it. So sorry.
I definitely just want to say that I still have major reservations about this, and as it is, I don't necessarily know if I would support it, but I appreciate the answers and I appreciate it.
Sure.
I have a follow-up. What Mr. Ace is saying is kind of why I wanted to expand the discretion to a week before. I think this year we were lucky enough, our superintendent did use his discretion to add a section. It seemed to work out very well, and thank you for doing that. But that was kind of the that was the reason I was suggesting in the first place, because we can't guarantee the superintendent's going to make the right call. I've been hearing from people over that are in some of those expanded classes thanking him for doing that. So personally, I would love to see that go back into it also.
And I would say that, again, that obviously we heard that discussion, and that was one of those things where when we went back and watched the video and took the vote count, we didn't perceive that there was enough support for that. Again, that's not to stop you from saying, I want to bring the amendment forward and let's have the discussion all 9, but that's why that wasn't in here. Sure.
Clarity. To be clear, you asked about discretion before school starts. That already is based on the guidelines. You were asking for a hard, like if it hits a number, go ahead and do it. That's different than the discretion.
Within one of the cap.
Right, so that's not really discretion. That's building in a pre-cap. Okay, so just wanted to clarify that that's actually what you were referring back to. Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
Oh, sorry, Mrs. Lynn?
The discretion.
Thank you to the policy committee for this. I was a pretty vocal, I had large opinions, and I really think that this did a pretty incredible job of capturing a lot of opinions in a, I didn't know what was gonna come for us, and when I read it, I was actually very, very, very impressed, and I'm gonna hearken to Mr. Krasnoff's points. I think if we're gonna give the superintendent discretion, that is the nature of the beat. It's gonna come with feedback, and it's gonna come with sometimes, and I will echo his points that I saw this year, what I would hope to continue to see. I fully support most of this. I do have a question just at the middle and high school level, that first bullet point. For normal class instruction, a class exceeding 25 shall be considered undesirable. I'm curious, and I'm not a policy expert, what does the word undesirable mean in practice? So obviously, and now I'm opening it up, it's a mood. But like for me, I would, and this may be through the chair to Mr. Testani and Dr. Parrish, like, can we get an idea of like how many sections we currently have right now, excluding like our chorus, excluding our classes that we know are like large, that are currently over 25, like what is not undesirable enough not to do?
We, in every budget,
have that?
we didn't ask for it now, but it comes as part of the additional material in every budget book is how many sections by subject exceed 24 students. So we do get that every year. And then if you remember when I'm sure you've seen this, when we've gotten the report of, okay, you say that there are this many sections in biology. And then you break out the actually science is a bad subject to pick and social studies. And then you see, well, wait a minute, but here's a section that has 14 and here's a section that has 28. And that's the nature of the scheduling beast. But I think we wanted to signal, we don't support it. We don't think it's the best for instruction. On the other hand, for us to say cannot, it's just get ready to pony up some money.
Just linguistically like a bridge too far. I think, thank you for where to find that number. I think for me, it was like, is it, like, how many are we finding undesirable?
We definitely have
Curious.
many.
Many.
I mean, we have more than I'm comfortable with at all, but I'm also here the one raising issues about FTEs, so,
And to a similar vein, and I actually appreciate the perspective, for me, like, I've been looking at that number of like K-5 class size averages just in the county, and like the instinct in me is to take a swing at that number. Now I know what our facilities can fit and what we can't at the moment, so responsibly, I never took that swing. So I do appreciate using a word that's actually able to be used in practice, because while we all want to like aim for the aspiration, to Mr. Ace's point too, like we want to leave discretion for the superintendent to work within what we have and what the actual practice is going to be. So I appreciate the policy committee's swing at this. As of now, I don't think I'm going to have any amendments, but I'm going to keep looking at it. But I very much appreciate the work because it was a lot.
Naldi?
I agree. I think this looks really good and it implemented qualitative and quantitative responses. So I've reviewed it a number of times and I find it very good, and I've dealt with this situation, so I do appreciate the hard work that's been put into this.
Well, it took us long enough, but I will admit, as policy chair, once we passed the first week of school, it was just, all right, let's get to it as quickly as we can, because in case you can't tell by your full board agenda, we've been working through a lot of policies, but still, I wish we could have gotten it to you sooner. So I do appreciate the work that the committee members put into it.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mrs. Maxon-County. All right. Approval of deletion of policies for the policy audit. Recommended motion. Board of Education approve deletion of the following policies. Feel free to ask me to waive the reading. Mrs. Rinaldi moves to waive the reading. Any objections? Okay. So just these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different policies, and Mrs. Maxon-County, just for the board, these are one and for deletion. Yeah, for deletion. These are one and dones, but I'll hand that over.
You ready to make a motion?
Let's make a motion.
Yeah. Mrs. Maxon-County, and seconded by Mrs. Flynn.
Yeah, so these are all either of no use or they have been moved elsewhere. For example, the physical exams opt out got added onto policy 5141.3, health assessments and immunizations. We've already moved that language up, so now we wanted to get rid of it. Kate recommended something else with it, but this we thought was much neater, and also it was on the same topic, they belong together. And the contest for students, well, we don't do that, so why have this as a policy?
And community use of school facilities.
Duplicate
in the 3000s.
Yep.
All right, any questions? This is a one and done, so they're going away. All right. I don't think there's any public comment unless anyone has public comment. But other than that, I will take it back to the board. All in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, approval of the minutes. Recommended motion that the Board of Education approve the 10/8/2024 BOE regular meeting minutes. Can we get a motion, please? Mrs. Flynn, seconded by Mr. Asa. All right, anything on that?
I have one slight amendment, I believe.
Okay.
On page 1, I believe Mr. Asa was absent. His name. The approval of the minutes vote. Page 1. First name, Mr. Asa.
Already left.
Motion passed 7-0. So there's 9 listed, but only 8 votes. It's just a accuracy thing, sorry.
I see what you're saying.
Oh, okay, so you make a, please do.
I make a motion to remove Mr. Asa from the vote count, on the approval minutes on page. Minutes.
Oh, just my name.
Just your name.
Yeah, October 8th, 2000.
Second.
Then, if I may make a friendly amendment, we also need the change on page 6.
I thought there was a second.
Yeah, so the first part is the summary of votes, but in the detail on page 6 as well.
I love it. Carol's got
All right, all in favor of the amendments? Motion passes unanimously. And then back to the main motion as amended, please. All in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Good catch. Thank you. Superintendent report.
A couple of things in light of announcement yesterday. All those at home, just want to bring everyone's awareness, especially driving around town during arrival and dismissal times, as it's going to get dark in, I think, about 12 days. Just to be cautious of children riding their bikes, walking to school, distracted driving, driving too fast on our roads is becoming more and more dangerous. And I think everyone needs to just take a pause, put the phones down, slow down, get to where you got to get to, but also remember that there are children that are traveling to and from school every day, and we want to make sure that they get home and get to school safely. So let's bring that up. Yes.
I just feel the need to piggyback on that this morning at my school, student cut in front of a car, stopped the car, no helmet, head on the, I believe he's gonna be okay, but another accident today, so. In Greenwich, just, I think we see lots of, I apologize for.
No, not at all,
Just
please.
I couldn't agree more about the drivers and also with parents talking with their children about safe habits.
Yeah, and that's the other point with these e-scooters and everything else that are on our roads. And it was brought to my attention by a parent who this is also very big topic. Our roads were designed many, many years ago, and until infrastructure can evolve over time to meet the needs of a growing town into now a small city, I think it's important to be more and more cautious and try to have those conversations. I see a lot of kids driving around town on little e-scooters and things, no helmets, going the wrong way in traffic, being a little bit daredevilish. I know we have all done it as kids, and you can say it till you're blue in the face. They're going to do what they're going to do. But I just want to make sure that all our kids make it home every day safe, sound. So just want to raise that awareness. It was mentioned by Mr. Krasnoff. So Diwali is the most significant holiday in Hindu culture, celebrated by millions around the world. This year, it's celebrated on October 31st. We just want to wish everyone a happy Diwali who celebrate across our Fairfield community. Con-TESOL conference. Members of our English language multilingual learner department attended the 53rd annual TESOL. Con-TESOL conference, October 12th at Sacred Heart. Our McKinley's own co-teaching team of Jessica Keene and Amy Fox presented the workshop, Making the Push-In Model Effective by Truly Co-Teaching. So highlighting the successful co-teaching model that they delivered to deliver instruction in 4th grade over at McKinley School last year and continue it this year. So it was an honor to have them present and showcase the great work that's being done here in Fairfield right at McKinley School. So I wanted to make sure that we recognize Jessica and Amy for their professionalism and really highlighting what a co-teaching model really is. I know there's a lot of attempts at co-teaching across the nation in various settings and what that looks like. And I think they've mastered it because it takes a lot of planning, and front loading of that planning in order to deliver a true co-teaching model. And that they have demonstrated an effectiveness showing growth that exceeds the growth that you would see across the district. So they did a great job with that. We do want to recognize our Fairfield Ludlow High School Future Business Leaders of America, who hosted a teen entrepreneur showcase last week at Fairfield Ludlow High School. The showcase fostered entrepreneurship, provided networking opportunities, and supported fundraising efforts, all while showcasing valuable growth opportunities. If you go on our Fairfield Public School social media, you can see the photos. I do want to highlight tomorrow night, sold out. So if you didn't get your tickets, sorry, you're going to miss out. But
There's a wait list.
there is a wait list. So if you want to get on from 6 to 7:30, we'll be at the Pequot Library for a viewing of Screenagers, the elementary school edition age. And then followed by a panel discussion with myself, our own Rob Mancusi, and Maureen Sullivan as well. So we're really excited that it's sold out. It's going to be a lot of people. It's going to be a lot of fun and very informative. With that, I did make a pledge to our PTAC last month that I would do my best to try to accelerate in the removal of having the Chromebooks go back and forth to our third graders, possibly our fourth. So working with Marco and the team in IT, we should have that resolved in the next couple of weeks. So that's going to be a big gain for, I think, helping our third grade, pushing up to fourth grade, and then you'll hear in the budget priorities to fifth grade next year as well. So, and maybe with end of the year spend out if there are some surplus monies that we can find. But we're really trying to eliminate the Chromebooks going back and forth unless it's absolutely necessary to our elementary kids. It was obviously important during the pandemic. I think we're far beyond that. We can do better and not having to send it home simply for a charge and having another added device in the home to cause that that conflict between parents and student and children. So
Much appreciated as a parent.
yeah, I'm sure. Want to recognize the hard work of our Mill Hill students and staff. Recently, they participated in a school-wide initiative calling Look for the Good. This program helps elementary students and teachers express gratitude for themselves, each other, and the people who matter most to them. This is a big one. Fairfield Woods Middle School sixth grader Arabella Martin won the Global Invention Convention.
Ooh.
Yes, she did. Arabella competed in her school competition, town competition, the state, the Northeast, the United States, finally North America competition before attending the virtual global event in September. She's a winner for her invention, the hands-free feeding tube, which was very personal and close to her. It was inspired by her baby brother, and it allows a caretaker of a medically complex child to utilize a collapsible extension piece to safely feed and hold their child at the same time. Wow. I met Arabella, her mom and dad, and an amazing child, an amazing family. And the invention was, she's working on that now. She is working with patent attorneys to patent her invention. And I mean, it's just amazing that no one thought of this, no big corporate entity. It took a fifth grader at the time to develop this. And it's going to go worldwide someday. So, yes, completely. Just want to do a green team update on recycling and composting program, sir. Our K-6 students are making a difference in helping the environment through recycling and composting in school cafeterias. Really want to thank the leadership of our Fairfield Public Schools green team and all the hard work of the volunteers, the staff, especially our custodians in those buildings who really go above and beyond to make sure that the students have proper equipment to compost and recycle. It's a little extra work on their part, but they're happy to do it. They've been a big proponent and supporter of our students and our parent volunteers. So amazing job. Right now, we're estimating that the school diverts around 640 gallons of biodegradable waste from trash each week. year each week. So that's amazing. And we continue to highlight on our social media pages our amazing principals during National Principals Month, which will be coming to an end shortly. So as you can see, if you've been following, just some of the great comments by our students of their principals. It really shows how well our principals are known by their student bodies and the connections and the relationships they build with their students. So I think that's a testament to all their hard work and the great work that's being done across the district. And just want to acknowledge Whitson's, our food service provider, who during last month promoted the Connecticut Grown for Kids Week in Fairfield. And they worked with locally grown providers of peaches, apples, potatoes, green beans, and those were distributed throughout our schools, all our students. They did a lot of taste testing tries and sampled things like peach salad and green bean salad, tomato salad, try to get an idea and introduce these things into our cafeterias so that these could be future menu items throughout the school year. So, thank you.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Any questions? Okay. All right, committee liaison reports. Oh.
There was a special meeting of the Standing Projects Special Building Committee to approve Holland Hill roof invoices that had been missed at a previous regular meeting. Right, I did that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I did want to add one thing. We did complete this evening, prior to this meeting, tours of Dwight Elementary School by Board of Finance. It was done Saturday morning as well. So hopefully, I don't know, all members were given the opportunity, and I hope they took advantage of the opportunity to attend and talk.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, open board comment. This is Max and Kennelly.
Yeah, so 3 things, if you'll indulge me. First, I wanted to thank the PTA Council President who let me come in to speak to the president's only meeting about Odyssey of the Mind. Got people really enthused, took up a solid hour by myself on the agenda. I'm sure they were grateful for that time spent. But I was very grateful that they gave me the time for that. It wasn't my idea. They had questions. Secondly, all of us received this email tonight. And so I just wanted to, I'm not versed in this, but apparently the art department this year sponsored for the first time let me get the Think Pink art contest. And she was hoping that somebody could give a shout out about that contest today. It's their first time doing it. Apparently almost all schools participated. So there is and we got a couple of pictures. There's a sizable display at Pequot Library. It'll be there through October 30th. And she was just hoping that they could get a shout out today and, possibly get people to go and visit and see this art display again with lots of different participating schools. And then third, I just wanted to give a shout out as well to our High School Scholarship Foundation. If you go to fairfieldScholarshipFoundation.org, they have an upcoming fundraiser on November 2nd. This is a group that worked really, really hard to support our students in the most tangible way possible with money. So that last year they gave out over $150,000 to our graduating seniors at the 2 high schools. They've given away more than $2 million in the scope of their being in existence to our students. This fundraiser on November 2nd is really important, obviously, because every bit of that, these are all volunteers working, and every bit of that is going to our graduates. So they just were hoping to raise the profile of the event a bit and see if people would be willing, either if it can't go yourself, to sponsor, and that's about all I know about it. But it's a great event, and again, most importantly, a really great cause. Thank you.
Their website?
It's fairfieldScholarshipFoundation.org.
All right, anyone else? Thank you, Mrs. Mexican. Public comment?
Hello, Maker Gary, President of the Fairfield Education Association. I just wanted to touch briefly upon, we discussed earlier about attendance. And it is the Physician Association to work with the board and the administration as much as possible to encourage attendance and making sure that everyone who works for Fairfield Public Schools feels that they need to come to work because it's a positive environment where they're both valued and needed. And we'll continue to partner in ways. I do believe the best approach is a positive way to encourage people to understand how important they are. We are the teachers. Having said that, we do work in germ factories. So, illnesses are always definitely going to occur. Come by our schools around, starting now until springtime. Tissues are often a premium because we just run out. So we'll continue to partner and work with the boards as much as possible to make sure that we are having a good time.
Thank you. All right, and with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn, please. Mr. Krasnoff, second by Mrs. Flynn. All in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, everybody.